everybody. My name's Molly Onifer, and I'm the one who has been emailing you. I am the coordinator for the Civic Leadership Academy, and I also work in the Office of Community Affairs. So I'll tell you guys a little bit more about what our office does at a later time. You and I will be together for 11 weeks, so lucky you, lucky me. I just wanted to go through a few little housekeeping things. First I wanted to say thank you all so much for applying to CLA. We had over 140 applicants, and we brought together this wonderful group of participants from all over the city of Pittsburgh. You guys have incredible experiences and involvement in the city, in your communities, in nonprofits, and in service. So, I really hope that you take advantage of the time the social time that you guys have together to really share each other's stories, because they're all very cool and very interesting. Now on to the fun housekeeping things. So I will be the point of contact for you for the next 11 weeks, so feel free to reach out to me for whatever you need. The attendance requirement is you are required to attend 8 of the first 10 sessions. The 11th week will be a graduation ceremony, so it's a little bit more reception style rather than sitting and learning from the department's authorities and offices from the city. We are also going to be using an online sort of like an online community. It's called Slack. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. Awesome. So you guys are our go-tos for Slack, our tech support. So I will be sending the invitations either tonight or tomorrow morning. So you just sign up with your first and last name, and there's a little guide in your binder that shows you how to, how to do things within Slack. You can also ask me next week. There's also what's called a bot, which is sort of like a tiny little tour guide that will show up when you log into Slack and show you all the things that you need to know from there. The schedule is also in your binder. I did find out at the 11th hour this afternoon that there are 2 that may change, but I will communicate that as soon as possible and make sure that that's posted on Slack, and also get you guys a hard copy at the next meeting. There's also a quick communication sticker, so it has the CLA hashtag. It also has my information, the website for the Slack, and also the social media for my office, which is the Office of Community Affairs. I always recommend, to follow us. We sort of keep you up to date on what's going on in the city. So it's always just another great resource to learn about what's happening. If you have not done your vital information, like your emergency contacts, please see me at some time tonight, and we can get that taken care of, or email me, and I'll send you the link again. And if the last thing I say before I turn it over is, if there's an issue with your name tag or you're not satisfied with it, also shoot me an email or let me know, and I can fix it for the next session as well. So all the housekeeping, boring stuff is done. Any questions about it? Yes?
I didn't get the lighter.
Oh, I will grab you one as soon as I pass the microphone off. All right, so without further ado, I would like to introduce the Pittsburgh City Council President, Bruce Krause, who is also the City Council representative for District 3. And I'll just let him say his piece. Yes. Yes.
You said out of point of contact, you wanted us to email you or just call?
So you can call me, email me, or my mobile number is there as well. You can text me. That's probably the best way to reach me if you're going to contact me via that number. All right. Da 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 da. Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Do I need to use this because you're recording? Okay. I'd prefer not to, but I will. So it's my pleasure to welcome you this evening and to thank you for taking the time out of your busy lives to participate in local government and sort of see what it is that we do here. The mayor will be along shortly, but one of the roles of the council president is to get to cover for the mayor when he's running a little bit late. So, and I'm happy to do that. So, my name is Bruce Krause. I do represent the 3rd Council District. I have been in office for 10 years now. Our terms are 4 years. Hello. District 3 people. And Roy, you'll all get to know Roy. But I'm in my third term. I have 2 more years to finish this term, and I have had the pleasure of being elected the president of our council body now for 2 terms, my second one which will end in January. The council reorganizes in 2-year intervals, and every 2 years we reorganize, assign committees, and elect our president. So that will happen in January. But I always kind of like to get a sense of why you've come to do the Civic Leadership Academy, because, I mean, I could stand up here and I could sort of talk about what I think you want to hear, but I'm more interested in what you might like to think you would get out of your participation, and through that, perhaps we could have a bit of a conversation. So would anybody like to volunteer what motivated you and what drove you to come tonight? And if not, I'll pick someone. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks.
I run No One Left Behind. It's a operation here bringing interpreters from Iraq and Afghanistan. And so in order to bring them here and stand them up and have them be successful citizens, I need to know how the sausage is made behind the scenes so that we can tap into that and hopefully apply it to their successes. So that's why I'm here.
It's, you know, I can't think of a more important time to be engaged. You know, all politics is local, all government is local. What we're experiencing on a national scene, and I won't get too far afield, but I think we probably share common values, in what we see taking place in the nation these days is probably not who we are as a nation, and I can appreciate when those kinds of things happen, the desire to want to become more engaged on a local level where one finds their power. And so, I mean, that was certainly what motivated me to want to run for an elected office. I like to say I'm a complete accident. This was never in the cards. This was not something that I aspired to in my life. I went about my daily lives. I worked in the restaurant industry for much of my life. After a while, I started a business. I had an interior design business that I ran for about 25 years. I live in the Southside Flats. I started getting locally involved in our community council. Then I started getting involved in our Chamber of Commerce. And before I knew it, the council seat had opened. This is over a 5, 6, 7-year period. But the council seat had opened, and I was being asked to run for a public office. It had never entered my mind that I should do it. But there was a sense of obligation, if you will, or duty, or commitment to, leaving the world a better place than what I had found it. And so I entered the world of public service. And it was everything I thought it was going to be and more. Lost my first race. It was a very, very difficult loss. Lost by about 150 votes. I would have rather lost by 1,500. But I learned a lot. We came back, and we won. And like I said, I've been on the council for 2 full terms. People often say what an honor it is to serve in an elected office, and after a while that becomes almost repetitive and trite. But it is truly an honor to know that people took the time to engage in the process, to come out and actively engage, support, and say, this is who we want to speak for us and to represent us. And so the elected members that I know, at least, in the mayor's office and in the council office, take that obligation incredibly seriously and do our very best to always make you proud and act in your very best interest at all times. Someone else tell me, please, why you might have thought to engage. Oh, and not Roy. I knew he would. This guy, I have to tell you this, because he's a good friend. His name's Roy Blankenship, and he is a constituent that I represent and lives in one of our hilltop neighborhoods, and he's just an all-around good guy. You're going to get to know him.
I came to want to be a part of this class simply because I'm a father of 14 kids. They all go to school in the hilltop. In my community, I watched as people became more in touch with government and in touch with policies where they were depressed, and people started changing, and it became negative. And I had to try to find a way to implement myself, so I joined Mad Dads, and I work for Hilltop Alliance now. And the changes that I'm starting to make in the community, because I was one of the citizens, that I actually walk amongst people and get the support of my councilman, the police. It's a changing thing, and I just wanted to get the policies under me and learn what the departments actually do completely to be a better leader and to help, bring change and put our city forefront.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. Thanks. Who else might like to offer up why you decided to come? Please.
I guess I just feel like all of this information, at least on this outline, are things that everybody should know. So I'm here to learn it so that I can tell everybody else.
Yeah, and a lot of what you're going to learn is the nuts and bolts about how we do this, you know. It's one thing, you know, I had a completely different mindset, idea, impression, whatever word you might want to use, about what government does or does not do until I actually got behind the scenes. Allison, who you'll be hearing from a little bit later on in the evening, I think will share a common experience with you. The expectations, or what we imagine government is from the outside, is not what government is from the inside. And it is a challenging process, and it is a democratic process. And in that process, we are here to listen to each and every individual voice as we craft that very public and very democratic process by which we will choose to govern ourselves. And so, yes, does it move slowly? And yes, does it take time? It does. But it is because it is inclusive, and it is far-reaching and outreaching. And that inclusive process sometimes does slow the wheels, but it makes for a much better finished and final product when it's done. Council's primary, I'm sorry, I'll come right back to you. Council's primary role here is budgetary in nature. We oversee the purse. We oversee the expenditures of the tax dollars. The mayor presents the budget to council. The council reviews. Those expenditures are created, and then as those expenditures are made, they come before the council on a weekly basis for us to oversee each and every one of those expenditures. After that, we're a legislative body, and we create, again, through a democratic process, the laws by which we choose to govern ourselves. We come together in a democratic process to elect our leaders, who sit in a democratic process by majority rule to craft the guidelines by which we will conduct ourselves as a civilized society. And then after that, of course, it's constituent services. I can get into that a little bit. I won't get too far into it, but as long as the mayor doesn't come, we'll talk a little bit about the role of council in constituent services. Please.
My name is Ty. I live on Mount Washington, and I
Welcome.
sure. I'm just interested in the experience and meeting people. I've only lived in Pittsburgh for about 6 years, Washington D.C. before that. So politics is part of who I am and keeps me off Facebook if I'm here.
And may I be the first to say thank you. Social media is such an important platform, and I can't imagine a world in which we would live without that platform now that we have it. But it serves both good and it serves bad, and you know, and I always like to argue for balance in that, you know, that we can stay connected and we can share thoughts and ideas, but we can do it in a constructive and contributory manner. It doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to tear us down. It can actually unite us in a very good way. What would you think the #1 constituent call that my council office gets? And I'll tell you a little bit about my council office in a minute. Oh my God. Give her an A+. You're my golden buzzer. Are you watching America's Got Talent? You're my golden buzzer. It is the #1 call the council office gets on a daily basis. Waste management. Waste management. No matter what, it is the #1 issue. What do you think the #2 issue is that we get? I'm sorry? Potholes? Well, let's expand that to say transportation. And so then I will include that to be roads, infrastructure, parking, transportation, mobility, how you move people in a modern 24/7, 365 world. That is absolutely, without doubt, my #2 call that we get. Council offices are designed by population, not geography. So by our city charter, we must represent within 1% an equal amount of population. And we must have by law 2 minority districts. So our council offices exist in about 33,000 is the number of people we represent. I have the Southside Flats, I have the Southside Slopes, I have Allentown, Belts Hoover, Knoxville, Mount Oliver City, St. Clair, Arlington, Arlington Heights, St. Clair Village, Mount Washington, South and Central Oakland is what defines my council district. In my council district, we imagine about 17,000 students living off campus campus in South and Central Oakland, about 3,500 students living off campus in the Southside Flats, and now well into the Southside Slopes and really going into Arlington. So of my 33,000, I get about 20-ish thousand that are students living off campus, and the other 12 are the people that call me about the students living off campus. That's our lives, and that's what we deal with. But keep this in mind, too, and I was speaking to a younger, I was speaking to a younger audience today. Wipe that, I didn't mean that. There were a group of Kappa students that were in, and that I had a chance to speak with this afternoon, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, help me out again?
Landlord, students.
Man, I'm sorry. It went, I lost it. But anyway, let's go back to you, and I'm sure it'll come back to me. We do this all the time. It's been a long day. What brought you?
Hi, my name's Jan Nedden, and I'm recently retired from UPMC, and I have a part-time practice doing substance abuse assessments for courts, attorneys, and Department of Transportation. Several years ago, when you decriminalized marijuana within the city up to a certain point, I was just impressed to the nth degree with council doing that. And so I'm really interested in what's happening drug and alcohol-wise in the courts, and are we promoting treatment in lieu of incarceration? Just sort of that, and is there some way I could be of help on a volunteer basis in that whole realm?
Yes.
So that's my major interest.
So you sort of brought me back full circle. What I was going to say, where I lost my train of thought, is when our manufacturing economy, which was largely glass and steel, dissipated, what was our salvation was our education, medical, arts, and cultural institutions that we had nurtured for decades and decades and decades, which was really our salvation, which brought us into this new reinvented Pittsburgh that we're all experiencing today. And so while I say that in a very fun and sort of jestful way about representing students, I want to also stress the importance that and the contributory nature of the students here in Pittsburgh and what they contribute to us in ways that I can't even begin to explain. In the realm of drug and alcohol, I'm very open about this. I've talked about this many times in my years in council. I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict. I have been sober for 29 years now, and so that has been a very important policy for me to deal with here on the council. One of the things that we have been actively working with is Children's Hospital and pediatric care, and wanting to find ways that we can identify children that are prone, most likely, to lives of addiction, and find pediatric care in ways that we can intervene much earlier in a person's life, as opposed to waiting until we have to send out our first responders to apply Narcan as they're dying in the street. And what does that look like, and how do we achieve that? My office is also very proud to sponsor what we call the Walk for Recovery. This will be our second year of doing so. You can find it at recoverywalk.org. Anything that you might need to know about it, but we'll be marching on September 16th at 9 a.m. And working in conjunction with the governor's office and the attorney general and many state elected officials, our mayor locally here, my council office, and numerous organizations. We are committed to telling the story of hope. Every day we pick up the newspaper and we learn that somebody else has died. This morning I learned that someone I represent in my council district died last night of an overdose. And so we want to be as active as we can be to tell the story of recovery, and that addiction is not necessarily a death sentence, although it is a terminal and chronic illness that must be managed, but to tell the story of hope and that there is recovery. And every day hundreds of thousands of people across the nation celebrate lives that are happy, sober, and free. And that's a story that's really worth telling. So thank you. So you can come to the Recovery Walk.
I plan on it.
Way to do it. Thank you. Hi, Rick.
My name's Rick. I'm from the north side. Spring Garden. Really, the reason I got involved, we're going through, well, what it looks to be like gentrification coming up at this point, moving from Deutschtown into Spring Garden, which is good. We need this. The hotel, like I watch what's going on. I belong to Spring Garden Council, CASGAD they call it, and there's some problems with that now, but things are moving along pretty smoothly. My other reason is that, I don't know how to say it, I'm with this lady here. I lived on the streets here for 25 years and drunk and, drugged up. So now I got like 10 years clean.
Congratulations.
I got 10 years, 11 months, and 20 days. So I'm moving up.
Congratulations. It's great.
The point was that I haven't been real happy with the way some of the money's been spent. And so I figured I'd come, at least I learned some of the facts and find out, what the limits are and that kind of thing.
Right. Gentrification is a huge issue right now. I give kudos to this mayor and his commitment to a healthy and balanced city. I watch him wrestle with this every day, and God bless him. I don't know that I could do it in the effective way that he does, but we need to build a tax base. You have to have a level of income so as to build a tax base, to have the fiduciary ability to deliver the services and grow a city, and yet at the same time balance that with the understanding of not leaving the least among us behind. And how do we make certain that we have an equitable and balanced and level playing field, encouraging development, but also making certain that those among us, that everyone is cared for and has an equal shot, equal opportunity. What you find the council wrestling with now for about 2 years, and we'll complete this process by the end of this council session, is our affordable housing initiative, and how do we create an ongoing sustainable funding source so that when higher end developments are taking place, there's affordable housing that's being created at the same time to make certain that we keep that playing field equitable, equal, and balanced. You're seeing how that played out in East Liberty, and how very hard the mayor worked when he was on council here to bring that kind of development into East Liberty, and now, right now, being able to manage that it's not overgrowth, but it's balanced growth, and that that everybody in East Liberty has a fair and equitable shot at living a good, healthy, quality, sustainable life. So it's probably number one on I would argue the city's radar. Please, and then I'll come back up to you, Nancy.
I moved to Pittsburgh 6 years ago to go to law school, and I graduated from Duquesne 3 years ago. I love this city. It's it's my home now, and so the reason that I was interested in this is because I have the time and the ability to give back, and as many opportunities as there are for that, I'm willing to take. When I was an intern, I did criminal defense, mostly for juveniles. That's something that really touched my heart. I've been sick ever since I passed the bar, and I've taken advantage of the wonderful medical community here. They're the reason that I'm here today. And there's so much that I'd like to do to give back to the city.
Yeah, I hope what you find by having this common experience is the realization of this wonderful fabric, this quilt that we create by all the different kinds and types and homogenized sort of society that we are here in Pittsburgh, and that each and every one of us serve this incredibly important piece of that puzzle. And we are what makes this city as great as what it is. And you play as an important role in this city as I do, as Molly does, as anyone in this room does. And I hope you'll take that away as your experience from being here. Nancy?
Hi.
Here.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Leff. I live in the Dominion of Gentrification, Lawrenceville. And what you were talking about, that's one of my major issues, is housing. And I was gone from Pittsburgh for almost 40 years. I came back and everyone said, move to Lawrenceville, it's really cheap. You can find a great apartment for $300 a month. And coming from California, that sounded really good. So here I am, and now everybody, you can't get a new apartment if you own it for $500K. So it's unbelievable. Affordable housing is one of my major issues. I'm also what I call a wisdom keeper, which means I'm over 55. And I hate the word elder and senior.
Okay.
So We need places for people who are older. We need places for people who can't afford. We've got in Lawrenceville the old guard who've been there for a number of generations, who come from steel families, and then we've got all the hipsters moving in who are 30 years old and buying $500,000 condos, and there are a lot of stresses between them. So I'm kind of in the middle of them because I'm older, but I've been in Lawrenceville only 6 years. But I love the young people, and I like the old people, and so I can see both sides. But we really need. I was saying to someone before, if I leave my apartment, there's no way I can buy here. But if I leave my apartment, I'm going to have to move into a senior high-rise. I will never be old enough for a senior high-rise. So, and I'm one of many, many, many. You know, I took early retirement because I couldn't find work here. No soft skills being bought here. And so my issues, and I'm also involved with Lawrenceville United, which is an advocacy, wonderful organization. I've lived in a number of states and cities. I've never seen a group like this. And I'm involved with what's called the Advantage Program. It's for people 55 plus, to get people out of the house, to get them meeting each other, socializing. We have parties for them. We have a party for them this weekend at Ham Bones. But you have to live in Lawrenceville and be over 55. So that's my issues are seniors. Well, as I said, I hate the word seniors, but it's really, we call it Senior Advantage, and we took the senior off of it. So anyway, those are my issues for being here, so I could take the information back.
So one of the things you're going to hear about, and I'm going to take an opportunity to introduce Allison Hardenden. Allison, you're going to hear from in a bit. She is the nighttime economy coordinator for the city of Pittsburgh. And what does that mean? What that means is that the city has come to the realization that this sort of social economy that has been developing now for several decades is of such importance that we need to be out in front of it, nurturing it and helping it along. You saw that take place in the South Side back in the early 80s to the mid 80s, how a food and beverage economy came in and revitalized the East Carson Street corridor. You're seeing that happen again here in Lawrenceville, forgive me, that this sort of experience economy, as we like to call it, is moving in and changing neighborhoods, good and bad both, but there's an argument to be made for both. And so Allison is going to talk to you a little bit about the wisdom, if you will, of making sure that we embrace those changes and make sure that they are instituted to their highest and best order. And so, how do we do that? Understanding that we have wisdom keepers. I happen to be a wisdom keeper here in the city, and we have young people that are coming in. We like to call them a millennial generation, but then how do we find this commonality between the two generations? I like to say, I'm not here building a city for me. I'm on my way out in my role in this world. We're building a city for the 20-something and even younger that's coming into the city, that's going to inherit the city. And what does that look like? And what do they want to see this city be? And how can we help to plan for that strategy? And one of the things you'll hear from Allison is to talk a little bit about this, what is becoming known as the experience economy, where younger generations are more interested in spending dollars on the experience. What does that mean? Being out, maybe going to a play, being active in a social setting, perhaps travel, vacation, as opposed to material, whether it's buying a house, buying a car, buying clothes, those kinds of things. And so how does Pittsburgh make certain that we embrace that economy and prepare for that shift and make it to be its highest and best use? How are we doing? Am I okay? That's fine. I just don't want to, you don't want to step on the mayor's toes. I mean, if he's ready,
No, we'll let you do it.
Okay. So please, would you offer up?
Hi, everybody. Oh, this is strange. My name's Joanne. I'm glad to hear that you're a designer. That plays into some of my aspirations. There are three things I'm interested in. Oh, and I have kittens in case because I know all the people here would take good care of them, so if you need any. But, opportunity. One of the things that I felt validated to even to speak, because we talk of garbage and this gentleman. I was watching, I look out the window so I can yell thank you when the garbage men come by. And because I think one of the pieces of the quilt of a strong city, and also the trends now where we're recognizing, it's always been a fact, but we're recognizing that working people are very important, and work is work, and it's important, and also the sort of trend again to kind of focus or take photographs of especially men or fathers of color in doing something good. So I would like to, one of the things that I would like to see is some gestures of appreciation or even focus, because I was once in, I think it was sort of a lounge or a bar, and I saw some women, it was maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, and I saw some women gathered around a fellow. And later, you make up these stories, just like you make up stories when you see someone's grocery cart. what are they going to do? And it was like, well, what was I saying?
You had me at the kittens.
Okay.
Making up stories about grocery carts and being kind. I think really what you
No, I would like to see us. So these ladies were around this gentleman, and I thought he's probably going to a night job, and they're kind of creating a social kind of atmosphere so that when he goes to whatever he's doing, maybe it's a solitary job, he has this thing. So I thought, people like this have something to teach us, not, we don't have to be patronizing. How do you do it? How do you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning? And, what are your kids doing, and all of that, and so that's one of the things. The other focus I personally have is called Landlords Need Love Too, and be that landlords that are owner-occupied or that are the other scenario. And I think one of the things I would like to see is for the all the agencies, but also for the regulatory, like is it called PLI, or to be as much a resource, to see themselves and to function as much a resource as a punishment source. And the other idea, and I think there's something called like defensive remodeling. There was a story that you were quoted where there were 2 houses. Yes, and one of the things that was mentioned here is with drugs, and it's the same with housing, is early alert and defensive remodeling. So we need to find ways to, if people are in that situation, first of all, as early as possible, either it said something like, oh, the taxes went unpaid for 4 years. Well, first of all, it needs to be looked at, how long did that woman pay taxes when she was young and when she was strong and when she was housing people that before it was very yappified. So to just say, well, okay, let's shut her down or whatever, take her to a treasure sale. And the other thing is,
it was a very challenging situation.
Right, but there are a lot of groups that can be mobilized to not let it get that far, because if there's some kind of tickler where when those taxes were not paid, well, let's go see. Does she need the police for a welfare check? Do the people next door, and so on. So these are some.
Let me see if I can sort of collect your thoughts there.
Thank you.
If I may. Yeah, thank you. So something that I would take out of this conversation and hope that you'll take with you is the idea of educating people into compliance as opposed to citing people into compliance. And that, when I was new to local government and coming in, and I thought, that's it, why don't we just cite people, and that will change behavior. And it doesn't necessarily change behavior, but I think healthy and holistic outreach on a regular basis to educate people into compliance, you'll find better compliance. Allison, what does Jim always say? 80% of the people are always going to do everything
Yeah, no, it's the 60-20-20. So 20% of the people will do the right thing, 20%.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm Phil Donahue here, and I don't need to. But will you share that? Because it's a really important statistic.
And it applies to a lot of different things. It's kind of a general number, but approximately 60% of the people can be influenced in one direction or the other. So you have 20% of the people that do the right thing. You have 20% of the people that don't, and they need a different strategy. But you have this middle group, the 60%, that can be influenced to go in the right direction. So what can you do to make that 80% rather than just 20%?
And that crosses all department lines, regardless of whether it's building inspection or public works or, PLI or whatever the case may be. And so I hope you'll take that away, that we are comrades, we are collective partners in this, and that we are not adversaries in any way. We can't do what we do without you, and it's very difficult for you to do what you need to do without us. And so there's a partnership that we form. And speaking of that partnership, the mayor just walked in, and perhaps he'll speak a little bit about the partnership between the mayor's office and the council office. I'm holding down the fort for you, Mr. Mayor.
I want to hear you talk about stuff.
We talked about a lot of stuff already.
What about council? What do you guys do?
You name it, we do it. Can I continue for a couple of minutes? You're okay. So we're just trying to get a sense of why people came and what they expect to get out of participation and those kinds of things. So does somebody else have one that you offer, please? Yep.
Hi, my name is Pat. I live in Crafton Heights, and my passion, I guess, is home and creating community. When I moved to Crafton Heights, we bought our home in Crafton Heights 10 years ago, I was a landlord, and I rented the second floor and moved my parents into the first floor. And since then, my husband and I have moved to the second floor above my mom. My dad had passed away. And so we've got this really cool thing going where I can see my mom every day, and I can take care of my mom every day. And by the way, she does great, though. I mean, she's like a bad teenager. She's always off someplace. So, I am really interested in creating community. Like I'm the kind of person that likes to bring soup to my neighbors if I know they're sick and things like that. And I've had some success doing that, and so I'm interested in continuing that in my community and just seeing if there are other opportunities to make that kind of thing available.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. It's this strength, it's the foundation of Pittsburgh and who we are, and these little pockets of community that we build, and each one interdependent on the next one, and how we collectively, as I said earlier, create that quilt that becomes Pittsburgh. And wow, the national discourse might be saying that is not something to aspire to. Pittsburgh continues to aspire to that because it is the very foundation of the fabric that makes us the people who we are. So I'm really happy that you're here and that you're willing to share that. Who else would like to, please? I'm sorry, yeah, thank you, and then I'll come back.
Good evening. My name is Nichelle Parker. I live on the north side, central side. I'm a newer Pittsburgher. We've been here for 3 years, so I often had lots of questions. I became very active in our local association, but I always had questions like, why are the police officers with construction people? Why, I had all these whys. Why is my taxes so high? I moved from Annapolis, Maryland. I pay more in taxes here than I did for a house 3 times the size. So I just wanted to take this opportunity just to see, like you said, how the sausage is made. My passion is real estate. I am a realtor, 15 plus years. I lived in Washington, D.C., so to me, Pittsburgh is what D.C. was 40 years ago. Gentrification, the neighborhoods outpricing the people who can just really live and work in the city, not having to move to suburbia.
So, Mayor, if there's any one topic that's come up again and again and again, it is the overarching topic of gentrification, and really what does that mean? And we spoke a little bit, and I hope maybe you'll speak a little bit more about this, and how one balances a robust economy, that the tax base that has to be created in order to have the finances that we need to deliver city services, and at the same time making sure that we care for the very least among us and everyone in between, and making certain that we are creating an equitable and equal playing field, especially when it comes to just the health and well-being of everyday living, which most of us would call our homes, right? Our homes are our castles, our places of refuge, our fortress, and how important they are to us, and how that we can continue that American dream that everyone in Pittsburgh has equitable access to affordable, healthy housing. Okay? You okay? Yeah. You want to come up? Okay, so it's my honor and my pleasure to introduce not just my good friend, but the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, Bill Peduto.
Nice to meet you, Bill Peduto.
Welcome, thank you.
Rush Chairman. Hey, thanks, Mr. President. So you're going to get, like Bruce said, to see the sausage be made, but more importantly, you're going to get a behind-the-scenes view of city government. You're going to have access to the chiefs and the directors and folks that are in the position of making decisions. And during that process, what I really hope that you do is challenge. Ask the questions that are the difficult questions. Ask the questions you always wondered about, like why are our taxes so high? And be able then to understand when they're going through it, they're going to be ordered to be direct. So it will be at some points where the answers that you hear may not be what either you believe to your core or what you think is in the process. But what will happen is you'll be given honest answers, and you'll be given information if you request it to back those answers up. We wanted to make this an opportunity for every citizen to be able to see what goes on a daily basis and how long-term planning and strategy gets decided. The basics of government is that we are the largest social service agency in the city. We provide services to people. That's our core mission. Our budget becomes a reflection of what our administration is about and what the commitments of City Council are as well. And we'll always have more need than we'll have finances. We'll never have enough money to do all the things we want, but we'll have to make decisions on whether the funds are going here or whether they're going here. In doing that, through the budget process, really becomes, is in many ways a mirror of our own collective soul, where the city wants to be, what our priorities are, and whether or not we're meeting the goals to get there. On top of that, you're going to see a lot of, especially when you meet with innovation and performance, a lot of analytics, a lot of data that's being brought in that's used to analyze where we are and where the benchmarks are that we need to hit to get to where we want to go. You'll see it also when you're looking at police data and being able to do more than just cops on dots, which is where is the crime happening and why and where are our officers deployed, but actually going into all the way of predictive analytics where we're trying to figure out where the crime is going to occur to stop it from ever becoming a dot. You'll have the opportunity to look at finances, and not just on an annual basis and looking at a budget, but projecting out over the next 10 years, what's going to happen with all of our fixed assets, all the buildings and the swimming pools and the urban forests and the playgrounds and the fire trucks and the police stations and everything else, and trying to figure out how over the next 10 years we're able to address it. And we're looking to be able to create the priority for it. You'll be able to look out over the next 5 years and see our operating budget and see how many officers are we planning to have in 2018, how many firefighters we're going to have in 2020. We see an increase in the number of permits. Will we have more building inspectors, or will you be expected to wait additional months to be able to get a permit to do your kitchen? And then you'll start to see how all of these things start to play together, and how they start to work on a community plan for redevelopment in a neighborhood based upon housing, based upon bringing back a neighborhood business district, and how all of that sort of fits together. There are people that can turn an engine on and be able to hear exactly what's wrong with it. There are people that have the ability to do open heart surgery. There are people that can look at a city budget and it makes a mosaic, a picture. And we have a lot of people who are working for the city that have that ability. And you're going to be working and meeting with them directly. So I want to take the opportunity to first say thank you for caring enough about Pittsburgh to want to give your evenings up in order to be able to do this. Number two, to assure you you're not wasting your time, but you're actually going to get something out of this, because I'm at the graduation ceremony every time and people are actually hugging each other and saying, I wish I could continue doing this some more. And I said, hey, we got an entire page of job openings. Let's go check it out. And number three, to challenge you to challenge us, to give us the opportunity to hear directly from you, because there is no better way, not only for elected officials, but for directors and chiefs to know what's going on in the community that they serve than hearing from the community themselves. So with that, I'm going to cut the political and government talk off and open it up to questions and answers, because the first one who should be grilled is City Councilman Bruce Kraus. No, this is me. Yes. Yep.
I'm Mr. William Padoodle. My name is Siraji Hassan. I'm currently living in Northview Heights. I'm the father of 2 girls. I wanted to ask, there's new faces right now in Pittsburgh, and there's the current events that are happening around the world. I wanted to go off topic a little bit. Forget about the politics. Forget about the others. I just want to talk about the new faces that you're seeing in Pittsburgh. What is it that we're doing to welcome those people? Because right now, as the current events are happening, it's, for my people, the Somali Bantus are afraid because they're Muslims, and that Lady Liberty has turned their backs on them. That's how they're taking it. So my community is trying to make them comfortable, of helping them like feel settled and keep them calm, and that everything is going to be okay, because the president it's him, let him be him. But here I wanted us, and I wanted your help to help us make our people safe, and that they're welcomed here in Pittsburgh.
Let me preface my answer with 2 short stories, and I'll try and keep them short. 1850, Pittsburgh's very different. It's basically the downtown area, the Hill, and Lawrenceville's getting developed, the Strip as well. And over on the other side, that's Allegheny City. But in the north side, that's all Allegheny City. In the city of Pittsburgh, at that time, there are 2 immigrant groups that are moving in very rapidly, the Irish and the Germans, and they're Catholic. And they build the first Catholic cathedral right across the street from us, right over where the Union Trust building is today. And as the Catholic population starts to grow, and this is going on all over America before the Civil War, there is a rising rebellion against Catholics. And there's a guy named Joe Barker who's a minister, and he preaches down at where the convention center is today, and what he preaches is hate. He is arrested by the mayor for threatening to kill the bishop. He's put into jail, and while he's in jail, a group of young Pittsburghers say, hey, you know who'd make a great mayor? Joe. So they run him in a write-in ticket, and they weren't too subtle. It was the anti-Catholic party, and he wins. And so they bust him out of jail, and they take him down to City Hall on 4th Avenue, and the judge says, wait a minute. First off, you don't get sworn in until January. Go back to jail. You have to stay there. So he gets sworn in. The governor's pardon never comes, so he gets sworn in, and they take him right back to jail in January. And then he comes the pardon the next day, and he starts his reign. First thing he does, he fires all the police officers. People say I'm tough on the police. This guy fired over the car. He replaces them with his own friends, and that starts a civil war in the streets of Pittsburgh. Next he does is he arrests the bishop, and he arrests the bishop for an illegal sewer tap-in at Mercy Hospital. And while the bishop's in jail, the Catholic cathedral burns to the ground, but they never could find who did it. So when we talk about how things were great back then, it was just the latest person, or the latest people that came over. 70 years later, my grandfather came over. And he came from a small village in Italy with a second-grade education. My grandmother had no education. She never went to school. She couldn't read or write. My grandfather settled in Carnegie, and at that time it was the Italians and the Ukrainians who were the two groups that were moving into Carnegie, and they were welcomed by the Ku Klux Klan. And the Klan marched down Main Street, Carnegie, and the leader of the Klan was killed in that march. My grandfather was a very, very proud man. He raised me from the time I came home from the hospital. He was always upset about the way that he was treated because he was told, go back, we don't want you. As the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, it would be a disservice to my own family if I didn't welcome every person who comes to this city and say, this is your city, here's your terrible towel, and it's yins. So despite what's happening in Washington, we're going to do everything that we can do to be able to make people feel that they're welcome here. And not just to feel that they're welcome here, but to make them welcome here. We're going to do everything that we can do with our public safety, with our police officers, of being able to go into the community, especially within the Latino community, that is so concerned that the police work as federal officers, and assure them that we will not do that because, number one, it's unconstitutional against the 10th Amendment. The federal government does not have the authority to be able to place rules that are not already given to them in the Constitution on state or local government, and we wouldn't even be the United States if they did have that ability. And the moment that they try to take away funding from us because we will not follow that mandate, we will sue the federal government together with cities all across this country, and we will win. There was a precedent back in 2008 when the federal government passed a law that required every local government to register every handgun sold. You had to register who the person was that bought it. And the Supreme Court voted, and Anton Scalia wrote the opinion, not exactly a liberal, that there is no right of the federal government to have any rules over local law enforcement when it comes to how the local law enforcement's run. So if this administration tries to do it, we'll sue, we'll win, and we'll be joined by every city across the country. And the third part about this too, there is an assurance of people being given rights. Back when my grandfather came over, all he had to do was survive that boat ride and be able to prove he didn't have whooping cough or something. I don't, you know, they just wanted to make sure you were healthy, and then they put him right into a mill. But then in 1924, Congress changed the law. And they said, hey, we welcome everyone. As long as you had Italians in 1890, you can come. Oh, you only had a certain percent. No more Italians. No more Greeks. No more Poles. No more Slovaks. No more Slovenians. No more Ukrainians. No more Eastern European and Southern Europeans. Because by that time, that next group was the Catholics from the other parts of Europe. And Congress passed a law that mandated that the percentage of any ethnicity had to be the same as it was in 1890. They were making America great again. My grandmother didn't come over until 1927. My grandfather didn't see his son for 5 years. And we're not going to let that happen again. And I assure you that Pittsburgh will be a city where every Somali Bantu not only will feel welcome, that will be here for multi-generations and will be the hope of our future. And I can say the same thing for the Bhutanese and the Nepalese that are living in Carrick and in the South Hills, for all of the Latino community that's building out Beachview and rebuilding a community there, and for everybody who is looking for a safe haven in a country that was supposedly created to be that safe haven on earth. You're welcome in Pittsburgh.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Here we go. Hold on. You got to get Molly's mic.
It's kind of a two-part question. First off, Pennsylvania's state constitution, isn't it a little bit more citizen-friendly and a little bit stricter than the regular United States Constitution? Like,
it depends on what they try to do in Harrisburg. I would say yes to that, except they tried to pass a bill that would require voters to have certain types of identification that the U.S. Constitution would not permit. So it's sometimes interpreted slightly different by the state legislature. So we've had to go into court now 5 times in each time for laws that were passed in Harrisburg, and each time they were found to be unconstitutional.
Okay, and the second one was more about the immigration status that he was saying. As far as a church sponsoring an immigrant coming over, isn't there actual doctrine about church and state?
If they are requiring the person to follow the religion, yes. But if they are serving in a capacity to find them a place to live, find them a job to be able to work at, no. So where we would get into trouble is if we funded an organization, any organization, that would require as a prerequisite of whatever they are providing, the acceptance only of one religion or the conversion to that religion. But as long as so much of the work that we do, we work hand in hand with all faiths to be able to do community outreach and community services, and we wouldn't be able to do our job as well without them. So there is an ability that Catholic Charities will work to help to bring people over from areas in the world that have been determined to be through the UN refugee countries. And we work with them in order to be able to do that regardless of what their religion is.
Thank you.
Yep. You want to go back here, Mo?
Mine is quick and it'll dovetail right into what we're talking about.
Yep.
Mayor, you were there for our launch last week along with the county executive. We had the Congressman Doyle. We had the head of the Heinz Endowment, so I know that you absolutely believe in what you're saying. But one of the things that we have an opportunity right now, it's something going on the national level. Some states are starting to do it, and I wonder if it's not something we have the will in the city, is to recognize the Afghan and Iraqi interpreters that we're bringing here, to recognize them notionally as veterans. And this has a pretty profound impact just to have that statement, even though it's not a legal statement. It's just an act of Congress or an act of the city itself. We can then take that to employers like University of Pittsburgh and ask that they at least functionally give them veteran status in order to help them with employment. And I wonder if that's something that, since we're seeing that push at other levels of government, if that's something that we can get done at the city level.
So first off, I have to publicly thank you for your service. And also, mission continues. The work you do with your nonprofit of getting veterans involved in community projects in helping to rebuild neighborhoods. I just came from an event, TRIA is having their national conference here, bringing enlisted association veterans from all over the country to Pittsburgh. And the folks from Colorado in the mission continues as well. We're talking about Pittsburgh and the 2nd Platoon being done. So you're getting national attention on this. With the work that you're doing now, and understand this, we made a promise. We promised that the interpreters in Iraq and Afghanistan who would work with our military and help our military would be given citizenship into our country. And for many of them, they put their own lives in jeopardy and the lives of their family. They were viewed as traitors, they were viewed as other types of things, but they built bonds with our soldiers, and they ate with our soldiers, and they take care of our soldiers in a different country. And we owe them that promise and to keep that promise. I would love to make Pittsburgh a city, and I will even promise you one thing further. I'll reach out to other mayors, and we'll start to build it. But let's start it in Pittsburgh, and you've got anything that you need. And the fact that the congressman, the county, I think we now have bipartisan support around this, and the foundation community is all behind it, is a testament, number one, not only to the mission, but the good work that you do. Molly?
Hi, I'm Jan Nedden from Squirrel Hill. Thank you for being my former councilman, and Dan Gilman's wonderful.
I like being a councilman. I like being mayor more.
Yeah, I bet.
It's a better job, Bruce. Just telling you.
And thanks for being a
Hours
great
little
mayor
longer.
as well. I lived in Cleveland for several years. This is a tax-based question.
Yep.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm not there anymore. But they were doing one thing really right, and that is I lived in the suburbs, but I worked in the city. I paid 4% wage tax, 2% to the city of Cleveland for the privilege of working there, 2% to my local government. when I came back here, I was like, what? I used to work in the U.S. Steel building. There's 22,000 people in that building alone, some people making an enormous amount of money. And what are they paying, $56 a year, or whatever the thing is that you pay to come into the city? Why isn't Pittsburgh doing that?
So great question. Because Pennsylvania will not permit us. There was an opportunity back in the 1920s to have the opportunity to have a commuter tax. It was called the Sterling Act. Philadelphia got it, Pittsburgh did not. We, back in 1940, around World War II time, there were 1.2 million people who lived in Allegheny County. 78% of them lived in the city of Pittsburgh. Today, there's 1.2 million people that live in Allegheny County. 27% of them live in the city of Pittsburgh, which not only means that we just sprawled out and built all these roads and sewer lines and all this stuff that costs money to maintain, but also means we lost our representation in Harrisburg to be able to even have that conversation. There are only 3 areas in the country where there are major metropolitan areas that are the major employers that don't either have a commuter tax or aren't a regional government. Buffalo, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and Boston. In San Francisco and Boston, you can't afford property. Property tax is high, so they're okay. I mean, they're able to afford their government. Buffalo and Pittsburgh are both struggling. In Columbus, Ohio, in Cincinnati, in Washington, D.C., and Cleveland and everywhere else, you pay part of your income to where you work, and you pay part of your income to where you sleep. But in Pennsylvania, we don't have that. And when we were going through those real rough economic times in the 90s, we're lucky we even survived, because our tax base, our property went down. The people living in the city were disproportionately elderly, who didn't pay wage taxes, whose property taxes were frozen, and all of our revenue that we're given by the state, and that's how we have to do it. We can't raise a tax. We can't even create a tax. We have to have the state give us permission to do so. Which, by the way, if the state said that sanctuary cities are illegal or that we have to follow the president's orders on whatever, we'd have to do it. The cities exist at the will of the state. And there's a famous case, Dillon's Rule, which basically said that the cities don't have the ability to create any laws that are outside of what the state gives them. So we have home rule charter, and that gives us some additional power, but it doesn't give us the ability to create a commuter tax. It won't give us the ability to tax people coming across the bridge. It doesn't give us the ability to create taxes. And in fact, the state has frozen our ability to raise the parking tax because so many people that pay it are suburban. They only want us to tax on the people who live within the city and give us that ability to raise our property tax or our wage taxes. Yeah. It's tough. It's like working within a box, and that finite box seems to squeeze in tighter and tighter. Fortunately, incomes are going up, property values are going up in some parts, and that's helping to be able to expand somewhat. And remember, those are the same 2 taxes the schools live on too. So being able to not have to close schools but have quality education in the city is contingent on that too. Yep.
Hi, good evening. My name is Justin Sandher, and thank you to everyone else for being here as well, because it's an awesome opportunity to meet everybody in this room, and I look forward to it. And thank you, Mayor, for being here as well. I guess just piggybacking on that question and getting into a bit of the gentrification question, obviously having a strong residential tax base is really important as we build that tax base and we have the funds to do things throughout the city. The other great component is that we have these large businesses that are coming into the city, and they're also providing a strong tax base as well. What are the plans and what is the goal ultimately to hold them to the fire, to hold their feet to the fire, to ensure that they are investing in the types of things that will enable the communities to stay where they're at, the culture to stay, the people to stay, as opposed to creating high-paying jobs and forcing those individuals out of the community?
Great question. So when it comes to gentrification, we're seeing it in certain parts of the city, and then in other parts of this city, we're seeing no development occurring whatsoever. You talked about Crafton Heights earlier. When you look at Sheridan and Elliott and Esplin and areas that you really want to see more investment occurring, especially within home ownership, we need to be able to do more to spur that development. But when you look at places like East Liberty or Lawrenceville, and soon the Strip District in Polish Hill, you want to be able to make sure your no way is being pushed out as the prosperity starts to come in. So you can't fix it with one size fits all. A lot of people want to have what's called inclusionary zoning all over the city, which means that in Knoxville and Beltshoover, in Manchester, you would have to have a certain amount of affordability as a component of anything that's built. Well, our policy within our administration is we let the neighborhoods decide. So in East Liberty and Lawrenceville, there's a strong demand that have inclusionary zoning, so we'll support the community, and that would be done there. But we then also have to find a way to invest money to get developers to go in areas where there's cold markets, and not having restrictions on it, but being able to invest. We want to see Carrick come back fully. We want to be able to see that whole hilltop continue all the way to Beachview and see development occurring. You're seeing it in Allentown right now, and it's great. It's organic, but it's also being spurred by economic incentives to get small businesses to locate there. So in some areas of the city, we have to give sugar. We have to hit the gas pedal. We have to look at areas like Homewood, along Homewood Avenue, and figure out how can we bring entrepreneurs in and reopen that business district with small businesses. And then in other areas like East Liberty and Lawrenceville, we have to hit the brakes. And we have to figure out how we can create inclusionary zoning so everyone has an opportunity to live there, and at the same time, be able to invest even more into affordability. My two biggest fears, and it's completely different than 2013 when I first ran for this job. Number one, how do we keep Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh, when all these new companies come in and all these new people come in? What was that thing that made us special in the 80s, where people, even though we were down on our knees economically, loved this city and had a very, very strong affinity towards it, a loyalty towards it? And how do we not lose that? It's like putting too much salt in the soup. You don't want to ruin it, which was why it was really important for us when we came in to save the terminal building, because it was a testament to the old Pittsburgh that everyone could identify with, and knocking down 40% of it and putting a Panera in there was not a testament to the future of the city. The second part is, how do you make a city for all so that we're not pushing people out? You know, Penn Plaza was a horrible experience from the very, very beginning. It started with a phone call from State Representative Ed Gainey saying people in my district just got a letter saying they have 90 days to move out of an apartment. And it's like working with a gun to your head. And we were able to help. There were 200 people that lived there, 198 of them, to be able to find a place in the area around East Liberty, in East Liberty, or in their second location that they wanted. But we still have two more to do. And so it's difficult. I think the councilman spoke before I got here about the need. You have two tracks that you have to run on. One is the market rate, because you don't want market rate to go all around the city and have like a donut where prosperity exists on the edges but not within the city itself. But you don't want market to disrupt subsidized. So you have to be pushing at the same time strongly with affordability. As far as getting the big institutions to buy in, UPMC, the big four, UPMC, Highmark, Allegheny General, Carnegie Mellon, and Pitt. That's 90% of your nonprofit world in those four. In fact, UPMC is about 60% on its own, whether you're looking at employment or property or whatever. There were a couple of things that they said that they would be willing to do. It wasn't to fund the city's budget, but it was to create something like a Pittsburgh Promise. What are the visions for the next 15 years in this city? What are your priorities? What is it that you really want to do? And then they'll help to partner to make it happen. So when we talk in between City Council and our administration, our priorities are pre-K, universal for every 3- and 4-year-old. Imagine being the only city in the world that had a scholarship when you were 3 and 4 and a scholarship when you were done with high school. Imagine the opportunity for kids to start out in kindergarten at the same level instead of the ones that are, and I go to the meet with kids all the time. You can tell in first grade the kid that can't read and the ones who are reading already at a second grade level. Imagine if they all started out at the same. We could change lives. Second is affordable housing. Creating a trust fund that doesn't go into developers' pockets to develop the housing, but goes into communities and partnering with organizations to fix up the blight in the neighborhood and turn it into home ownership opportunities. We partnered with Habitat for Humanity last Veterans Day, and we gave them 10 houses. And we're now working with veterans, and they are putting in sweat equity, fixing the kitchen, putting on a new roof. And then the house is theirs for $950 closing cost and a 0% 30-year mortgage, meaning that house costs less to own than it would cost to rent. And I have 17,000 vacant properties, blighted properties, empty lots that we can partner with churches and community-based organizations and start to turn it over. So those become the first two really important issues that we want to see UPMC, Highmark, Carnegie Mellon, Pitt helping to partner with us on. And then we start looking at a whole host of others, everything from green infrastructure to creating a zero waste city, to being able to do all these goals that we have and benchmarking them out in a 10-year period so that by 2030 we're there. You're going to hear a lot more about that over the next 6 months, but the buy-in has to come from them, that they're not just throwing their money into a city budget to make up for where the holes may be, but they're doing something that will show the world how these cutting-edge institutions are helping to change society in the city they call home. Yep, they want to see the big thing.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Smith, and I live in Wind Gap over in the West End. So you were just talking about mostly in the east, you talked about in the south, and I think I heard you say a little bit about Elliott. But what is your thought of the West End, Sheridan, Wind Gap, Chartier City?
Yep.
We're forgotten over there.
Yep. So working in particular around Wind Gap and Chartier City, what's missing is a community center. And so we've been working with the churches and starting to put together a plan like there is in the East End or the East End Cooperative Ministries in order to be able to provide a center that would provide services from children to grandparents, and working with a couple of the ministers to extend it so that it would include everyone, and that we would then help to raise the funds to be able to make it happen. In Sheridan, we're looking at piloting a new program. I wanted to do it in September, but it looks like it's going to be January, which is going to be called Rec to Tech. Sheridan doesn't have a community center for kids. So what we're going to do is use Langley. We're partnering with Pittsburgh Public Schools. And after school, kids won't be just playing basketball or swimming. They're going to learn how to do coding. They're going to learn STEM and different things, but it will be done in a fun way. And then we want to keep the program open at night so parents can come down and start to learn potential for free of new careers. Sheridan Park hasn't had anything for so long. And so we're putting money into working with the community in order to do a master plan and to remake the park into a place where people will actually want to use. And the biggest focus in all of those neighborhoods is home ownership. We have a lot of people coming in buying up houses there that are simply not even flipping them, but putting them into rent and then not maintaining them. And if we lose more home ownership there, we're going to start to lose neighborhoods. So we want to be able to find ways to get those properties and then offer them for sale.
Let's just do one follow-up question. You talked about what was it, Rec to Tech?
Yeah.
We actually have an after-school program in Langley now. Is that something that we can possibly partner with?
Yeah. And in fact, we've been working with Pittsburgh Public Schools on this. So just make sure that we'll coordinate, and we'll make sure that our office is aware of that as well. We also worked with the Police League on the boxing program to bring it there as well. It's that entire area around Langley. That's a focus of ours. We want to return that to a neighborhood business district, not just a Family Dollar, but small shops and the PNC Bank and getting that back online. And then the other thing we need in the West End is a high school. So we're looking at a lot of different opportunities. We have, in an area that had 4, there's 0. going to be able to take one last question, then I'm going to have to roll because I got a friend coming in tomorrow from Colorado. He was my college roommate at Penn State. I got my master's at Pitt, but we're going up to the Penn State game. And my house is a wreck. So I'm going to do the proverbial redding up. I got the Swiffer out. He doesn't get the full quality, cleaning the floors and everything. He deserves Swiffer.
Good evening, sir. My name's Rob. I live in Garfield, the belly of the beast somewhere, and it's the most exciting and dynamic neighborhood in the city right now, I really feel. And I have gotten to enjoy some of the most exciting aspects of the city's development in East Liberty. And one of those aspects was my participation in the formation of Tech Shop, which unfortunately now is facing closure. It will close on September 30th. And I mean, it's a business and that's unacceptable. I mean, it happens. But I wanted, because of your interest and the efficiency that you were able to talk about the history of Pittsburgh and how important that obviously is to you, I wanted to share with you like how I feel that my experience in that entry-level tech fabrication business really is a part of the history of Pittsburgh so far as the last several years. It seems like it would be like a privileged position to be able to go to Tech Shop and participate in that, but I want to tell you that it's really not. Like a lot of lower income people were able to leverage nonprofit associations to take part in very high-tech training, and in that way I feel like it's an intrinsic part of the technological workforce development of Pittsburgh. And I wanted to see if I could get some thoughts that you might be having on the possibility of not having that anymore.
No, so we may not have Tech Shop in the corporate model, but the idea of the makerspace that will be based off of machinery of 21st century in order to be able to create a shared space is something we want to expand. So 2 areas that we're looking at. Bakery Square is a great location. It's also a high rent location, and it really, I'm not being critical, but hasn't done enough to like help the entire community around it with Tech Shop there. 5700 Susquehanna Street in Homewood, having a shop there would help to build out the area around Faison and the whole area around that busway at the one end of Homewood. And in that location, we also have the Trade Institute of Pittsburgh, which teaches people the trades such as brickwork and ironwork. And we have a lot of different craftsmen that are in that same building. This is that big old Westinghouse building right on the busway. And then Energy Innovation Center in the Hill would also help when being able to partner with, I think there's 5 universities there now. And so what we want to see are nonprofit partners come and start to look, and then we would help to raise the money, because we realize with Tech Shop, the biggest cost is the initial investment of buying the laser cutters and being able to purchase the 3D printers and being able to purchase all of that equipment. And that initial investment is something that we'd be willing to look to invest in.
That's amazing, because I'm actually working to form some kind of nonprofit. It's been very important to me, and I've been surprised, very shocked at the opportunities that came my way just because of my association of having a membership at Tech Shop. It carried a lot of weight for certain considerations such as GE's additive manufacturing research laboratory that is out within the greater Pittsburgh region. But I had an opportunity to visit just based on the fact that I was a Tech Shop member.
So we don't have the money just sitting in, the vault. There's actually a vault right there, because when they built this building, credit cards didn't exist, right? So you paid in cash. But corporations, local companies, universities, foundations won't give $1 to a company, a corporation, to be able to keep them in Pittsburgh that's based out of San Francisco. But they would sponsor and support a nonprofit that was creating an organization in Pittsburgh that was Pittsburgh-based and helping Pittsburghers. It is an impossible sale on the one side to try and say to the Heinz Endowments or PPG, hey, I need you to contribute $1 million so we can keep this San Francisco-based company in Bakery Square. It's a lot easier to say, hey, we have this nonprofit group that's going to be doing job training as well as working with local entrepreneurs and others that are trying to start their own business in Homewood and the Hill. And one's going to be based on this and the other's going to be based on this, and we need you to be a partner with it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. No. So there's a lot of challenges. Gentrification is going to be an issue that you're going to be talking a lot about, and we're going to really hopefully be able to get specific about where it's happening and then what needs to be addressed in those areas to take it on. And then the second thought is, what's the next area? It could be Garfield. That could be the next one that people can't afford to live in. It could be areas like Beachview. Or Hazelwood, with all the money that's going to be going down there. But you're also going to be given the SimCity challenge of how do you do it and also have enough money to have 900 police officers? How do you do it and keep all of the schools you have open right now and look at the promise of one day having more neighborhood schools? How do you do it and have a dream that within 15-minute walk, every child in the city of Pittsburgh has a park to go to no matter what neighborhood they live in? How do you do it and have those lofty goals while at the same time understanding that your authorities also have work to do? How do you get every lead pipe out of the city in 12 years? How do you get the top water filtration system in the country installed in the next 6? How do you do that when you have debt and everything else? I absolutely love this. I often joke, you know, I'm Catholic, so I'm going to spend a lot of time in purgatory. And my purgatory is going to be that I'm going to be the township manager of a suburb where all the streets are right angles, they all have a driveway and manicured lawns, and nothing happens. And I'll sit there and go crazy. There are challenges in every city. The greatest thing about Pittsburgh is we're at the perfect size where we have enough of everything. There's an economy of scale to be able to actually get it done, but it's small enough that you can really get it done. So now your challenge is to be able to work with us and to be able to have that opportunity to see department by department what's happening and then question by question. And I can assure you this, when we get back together, when the graduation occurs, you're going to be like, wow, did I learn a lot. Hopefully you teach us too. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Molly.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor Peduto, and thank you, Council President Kraus. So we are a little bit behind on the agenda that was provided. So on your name tag, you were there's a number. So if you can't see it, ask your partner or your person to your next to you, your neighbor. That's it. We are going to go into the council chambers. Please find the.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Councilman. Find the group number that matches the number on your name tag. We're going to have 6 groups. Unfortunately, pushed for time, so we're going to have 10 minutes with each presenter, but we're going to be meeting with the Office of Municipal Investigations, the Nighttime Economy Coordinator, the Critical Communities Initiatives Manager for the Mayor's Office, the newest Department of Mobility and Infrastructure for the City of Pittsburgh, and there's 2 more. Oh, the Commission on Human Relations and the 311 Response Center. So if you guys want to move in there, I will get the presenters out to you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Wendy Urbanik, and I'm the manager of the city's 311 Center. So 311 is our customer service center, and we're here to help you with any kind of problem you might need. You might remember back in the day, the old phone books had the blue pages. To try to navigate, to find who you need to talk to about what problem was pretty impossible. So we created 311, so you have a one-stop shop. Just call us and we help fix all your problems or get where you need to be. So we've gone through a lot of improvements since we opened in 2006. We started out from 8 to 4:30, and now our hours are expanded from 7 to 7, Monday through Friday. We had horrible old technology when we first started, a database that was designed in the late 1980s in-house. When it was created, it was great, and our computer guru added all kinds of bells and whistles to try to make it better, but we just ended up having to bite the bullet and get a new product. So when Mayor Peduto came in, one of the first things he said was, let's get you some decent software so you can get the job done. So now our software has mapping layers, all the information. We used to have a streets directory. It was about this thick, and it was written in like a 6 font, and every time someone called us about a pothole, we would have to look up that street and see what Public Works Division would handle that. They're all distributed geographically. Now all of that is built into the system for us, so it makes our jobs a lot easier. In addition to public works and fixing roads and helping if you have a burnout street light, we do some public safety, non-emergency things. So sometimes people have questions about whether it's most appropriate to call us or 911. So any emergencies, you definitely want to call 911. But if it's a gray situation, the best way to determine is, does an officer need to be dispatched? So if you have cars parking on the sidewalk, that's actually illegal. Although in a lot of neighborhoods, if you don't do it, you're going to lose a mirror. That is something you could call us about, you could call 911 about. I would recommend calling us for that. We could send a police officer out to monitor. What they'll do though is every car in that block that's parked on the sidewalk will get a ticket, not just whoever you're calling on. They have to be fair with it. But if you have a car blocking your driveway and you need to get out for a doctor's appointment, there's a case where you would call 911. They do ask you if this is an emergency. Just tell them no. They triage it, so you're not going to interrupt an emergency. You don't have to worry about that. We also deal with private property complaints. So if you have neighbors that aren't taking care of their properties, not cutting the grass, their house is falling apart, we send inspectors out. Now a lot of people get frustrated with that because it does take some time. So the process is, once we receive the address, we usually send an inspector out within 3 days. The inspector will make the determination. If there's violations, the property owner gets a letter. Now, first of all, sometimes it's tough to locate the property owner. Sometimes they're deceased, sometimes they've moved out of state. If we do find them, then we give them 30 days to correct any violations. After 30 days, the inspector has to go out and check and see if that's happened. If not, we send them a second letter. We give them an additional 30 days to correct any violations. After the end of that 30 days, so that's 60 days total, we go out again. If they still haven't fixed it, then we send it to housing court. At that point, it's out of the city's hands. It's up to the magistrates to determine what's going to happen with that property and if there's going to be fines or violations. So, in addition to public works and police and fire, we do a lot of other things too. So if you're not sure who to call 311. One of my favorite things we got involved in was the Snow Angels program. So that actually started right after Snowmageddon. Were all of you here for Snowmageddon? Okay, that was a crazy time. 311 then became a backup to public safety. So from instead of 8 to 4:30, we started going 24/7. Now to get enough people in my office and enough phone lines, we really had to scramble. Now we have the capacity; it's there all the time, so we can back up if we need to. But for that event, it was a struggle to get people there. We had council members that came in and helped. We had people from city parks who, are lifeguards who would come in and help with that situation. Everyone pulled together to make it happen. But at that point, we were actually a backup to the National Guard. They were going out and getting people to dialysis appointments, chemotherapy appointments, helping them get medicines if they needed medicines. So it was pretty scary to go from, filling potholes to all of a sudden we're helping people get medical treatment. So, but we do what we need to do. That was a situation that was really unusual. Hopefully we won't go through that again.
I have the fortunate pleasure to say they also work with nonprofits too. I work for a nonprofit and she's came and sort of helped our program understand how to help the residents in the community. We're dealing with 311 and sometimes. Well, our organization, like I said, Hilltop Alliance, she comes to our meetings, and I would recommend that if you're a nonprofit or you work for one, sometimes it's good to get your neighbors together and sort of go on a campaign to help your community by getting the information that Wendy has. I mean, it helps. In the Hilltop, we're doing a lot to correct issues without having to put the inspectors under their caseload so much. And sometimes the city might not have enough employees, and I think as citizens we should try to make an extra effort to reach out.
Thanks, Roy. That's a good point. I love going to community groups and speaking. We don't have an advertising budget, so word of mouth is mainly how we let people know about our services. So definitely spread the word. We're here to help. We're here to serve, whatever we can do. Does anyone have questions about 311? No?
I know. I used the new app, so I had an alley light out. I used the new app, which MyBurg, and we had a light in the alley out, and it's very easy. You just went in there. I typed in the cross streets, and within 2 or 3 weeks they came out. They fixed the light, and they send you an email back saying it's fixed, or we came out, we fixed it. Yeah.
No, MyBurg.
No, MyBurg.
Yeah, Building Eye is a great one too. That's what PLI uses now for properties, private properties. So
it tracks it a lot better to me.
Good,
so
good. I'm glad
I appreciated
you like it.
that.
Excellent. Yeah, well, we get a lot of people that way, but Twitter is what really surprised me. We have over 8,000 Twitter followers now, and it's one of the least expensive ways for process a complaint. It comes right into our system, and then it'll send you the receipt right through Twitter as well. So that's another option. And then you can always call us. If it's not 7 to 7, you can leave a message. We pull all those messages first thing the next day. What else? And the website. You can put things in on the website as well, and it tracks the list of everything you've submitted to us and lets you track the progress of it. So, any other questions? Yeah.
How many people work for 311?
So right now we have 12, but some of them are part-time, some of them are full-time. We schedule more people for when we have higher call volume. The first hour from 7 to 8 is usually very slow. The last 2 hours from 5 to 7 is usually really slow. If we don't build up more volume, we might cut back a little bit to try to accommodate. But I mean, I recommend you talk to one of our operators if you get a chance. And if you ever have less than stellar service, let me know right away. We pride ourselves on providing good customer service. We appreciate everything the community does. The fact that you folks are here tonight shows us that, we can't do it without you. One of the great things about this position is it's allowed me to see a lot of the city's limitations. And a lot of time just explaining those limitations to people does the trick. Potholes is a great example. So in the winter, we're limited to something called cold patch, and it doesn't stay in the holes. In the summer, we have hot asphalt, which does a great job. So we'll get calls in January saying, well, they just patched it 2 days ago, and it's out already. It's not the fault of the workers, it's the material they're limited to. But the hot asphalt, by the time they got it there, it would be too cold to put in the holes. So once we explain that to people, it helps them understand. And the freezing and thawing in winter, that's why we get horrible pothole seasons in like February and March. As a matter of fact, now when we open the hot asphalt plant, I do a little asphalt dance. I get so excited. Yeah, it's that time of year again. This is how sad my life is. Any other questions? All right.
I live in Regent Square, and our brick streets are part of the character that.
Absolutely.
And we saw that the city was filling in indentations with asphalt. And I personally worked with our Civic Association to write a letter to our representative, our councilman. And there was also a liaison person from the mayor's office who comes to the monthly meetings, and he handled it also. And we were told that this was just temporary. However, nothing was done, and those asphalt coverings are still in place. And the problem is, during the winter months, water seeps in and breaks up the asphalt. And so it's only a temporary solution, but the city, we just gave up. Whereas, the brick lining should have been repaired and taken apart and done the correct way. So is that something that I could call 311?
Now, some projects like that sounds like it might need capital funds, which is a lot bigger. So it might be something that goes on a list for when they have the money to do that kind of major product. But yeah, definitely call us about it. We don't do the actual work ourselves. Some people think I have a truckload of asphalt in my car. But we get to the right people, so.
Yeah. No, this would be a Public Works effort,
Yeah, absolutely.
but-
Yeah, call us.
Okay. give it a
Thank you,
try.
everybody. And thanks for all you do. Here's my card.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carlos Torres, and I am the director for the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations. We are the civil rights enforcement agency for the city of Pittsburgh. We are considered an independent agency within the city government, and we work in 4 specific areas: employment, housing, public accommodations, and the delivery of city services. So what that means is any person who lives, works, or visits the city of Pittsburgh and feels they have been treated differently in any of the areas that I described above can file a complaint of discrimination with our office. Our services are 100% free, and we have been around since 1955. So we have been around for a while, which means I hope what that means is to you that we're not going anywhere, that we're here to stay. In front of the brochure that I gave you, there's a description of what we call protected classes, and it begins with age and ends with survivors of domestic violence. So any person who falls under any of these groups can file a complaint of discrimination with our office. Usually what I tell people is to trust their gut. So if you think or feel that something is just not right, you might be right. So call our office, and it is our job to investigate if in fact discrimination did take place. You do not need to have any evidence. It is our job to find the evidence. Yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity.
Oh, can you use the microphone, please?
Out of curiosity, when you speak of discrimination, is that again from a city worker to a citizen, or is that just in general?
So it could be from a city worker to a resident of the city or a visitor of the city. So it can include police department, fire department, EMS, animal control. It could be snow removal. It could be trash collection. Exactly. It could be another things. Or it could be, let's say you go to a restaurant, and when you walk into a restaurant, they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't serve people like you." Right? Or we don't serve women with wearing headscarves. Or we don't serve people in wheelchairs, or we don't sell black people, we don't sell gay people, we don't sell whatever, maybe Muslim people. That applies as well. It can also be in employment. So if you work for a private employer in the city and you feel that you're being treated different because of any of these things that are listed in front of this pamphlet, you can file a complaint of discrimination with our office.
How long does it take for a complaint to be processed? How long does it take for a complaint to be processed and come to a hearing stage, I guess?
So that's a very good question, and the answer, it varies. So if the evidence is readily available, very quickly. So for example, if your employer sends you an email saying, "We're firing you because you're too old," that's pretty clear that it was age discrimination, and it's very easy to close that case. In typical, it takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months for a case to close, depending how complex the issue may be.
And would you regain your position? How would that
It
work?
depends on the issue, but some of the remedies that we can find is back pay. So if a person was terminated but should have continued to work, that's considered back pay. If a person should have been hired or gotten a promotion, that's front pay. That's something as well that we can get, and or there can be some damages awarded to the individual. So if we find that discrimination did take place, there are several remedies. The other thing that we can impose on the employer is a change in policy, change in practice. So not only you have a new policy, you have to follow that policy. Also training. So training in the specific area of discrimination that we found, as well as monitoring. Meaning for a certain period of time, they have to report to us on how they have not only implemented that policy, but also apply that policy across the entire organization. Yes, sir.
What's the difference between what your office does and like an employment law firm? Like, why would, I mean, your office does this service for free.
Correct.
Why would someone go to an employment law firm and pay them to do this?
Perhaps because they don't know that we exist. So that's the best answer that I can give you. We do have attorneys that work for us, and we have attorneys that specialize in employment law, and we have lawyers that specialize in housing law. So we have attorneys at our disposal. We have city code or city laws in our favor. So we have our disposal, we have the full weight of a city government, as well as the expertise of, and our lawyers are outside lawyers in private practice that we have hired to provide that expertise to us. But to answer your question, my best guess is that people don't know that we exist, and people don't know that our services are free. Sometimes people feel like they have to have an attorney to represent their interests. We are 100% independent, and what that means is, the gentleman asked earlier, it said only a city employee. Well, a city employee, so let's say your complaint is against a police officer, we can take that complaint, because we can investigate the police, the fire, we can investigate unions, we can investigate every single department working for the city of Pittsburgh. Our jurisdiction is the entire city of Pittsburgh, and our statute of limitations is 1 year. So 1 year from the date of the incident, you can file a complaint with our office. Now, things that fall outside of the city limits, so let's say something that happens within the county has their own commission, and the state has their own commission on human relations. So they are, if it's not something that we can, a complaint that we can take and investigate, we will refer that person to the appropriate body that can take care of that matter. Yes, sir.
And this service is at no cost to the citizen, correct?
Correct. It doesn't cost a person any money to file a complaint with our office. One thing that I will mention, if in a housing discrimination complaint, the person who filed the complaint or the person who's being charged with discrimination chooses to go to court, our lawyer that I mentioned earlier becomes that person's lawyer and will represent them in court at our expense.
Out of housing discrimination, do you mean per se a landlord and tenant issue? Or now by that saying is that the landlord is not, say slumlord, let's use that terminology.
So slumlord is a little different. But when we're talking about housing discrimination, it may be, well, we don't rent to people with small children, right? Because children will, damage the walls and ruin the carpet, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not a reason not to rent to you. If you can afford to rent the unit, you should be allowed the opportunity to rent the unit. Okay? Oh, well, we don't rent to two men living together or two women living together. That's not your choice to make. If they qualify and they meet the criteria that you have set forth for other individuals, they should be able to rent from you as well. Oh, we don't rent to Muslims, so we don't, there's some people that say, we need your social security number to before we can rent. Not required.
It's not?
No.
So they don't have to take your social security number for a credit check? Quote,
credit check is different.
Okay.
But so the challenge with that is if you're a refugee or a person that has here on asylum, you may not necessarily have a social security number right away.
Excellent. Okay.
But there's an entity on an organization that said, no, we're going to pay the rent for the first 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, however long it may be.
So the government vouches basically.
Exactly. So there's no need for a credit check, right, or a background check.
Or a social security number.
Exactly.
Excellent.
But the reason they do that is to basically discriminate on the basis of your national origin.
Okay.
That's
excellent.
why we want to hear about those things, because see, a regular person may not think of those things. We do.
Yes. Excellent.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Our phone number is in the back of the brochure that I gave you. If you have any questions or any concerns, please feel free to call us. We work Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. And our services, again, are 100% free. If you have a question, you don't know if you're not sure that something is discrimination, call us. We'll walk you through it. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so I'm the nighttime economy coordinator for the city of Pittsburgh. I moved here a couple of years ago, less than 2 years ago, for this job. Prior to this job, I'd never worked for a city before, so that's like a new experience for me. I was a consultant for 20 years in nighttime economy and worked with cities all over the U.S. and Canada. And I worked for an organization that is sort of a think tank in nighttime economy and comes up with solutions to solve problems. And they were hired by Pittsburgh for a study of the nighttime economy in order to create a sociable city. And so I like to start with a kind of interactive exercise. And have you guys ever done word association? Do you know what that is? Like I say a word and use whatever pops into your head. Yeah. So we're going to just like do it all at once, you know? Just kind of blurt out what word you think of when I say my word, okay? So we're going to do two of them. The first one is, what do you think of, what word or phrase or what comes to mind for you when I say nighttime economy? Drinking? Restaurants? Anybody else? Tourism, bars, hotels, shows. Any other thoughts? Games? Yeah, and including like, you know, the north side with all the games. That's really a part of that. So the other one I want to say, it's a little bit different. I want you to think of a city in the world. It can be anywhere in the world. You can have gone there, you can have seen it in a movie or read about it. But I'd like to know what city you think of when I say sociable city. New York? Anybody? Sociable city? Mm-hmm. Baltimore? Anybody else? What was it? Orlando? I was just there. Atlanta, D.C., Minnesota? Anybody else? San Francisco? That's pretty sociable. It is very sociable. Okay, well, then we all have to say, what makes us think that's sociable? So, like, what are those characteristics that you think of that make up a sociable city? Diversity?
Outreach, everybody's outreaching to people that come here. So
Yeah, so make you feel welcome. It's like hospitable. Yeah.
Access, affordability.
Transportation's important, especially at night, because it's usually non-existent or limited. Anything else?
Yeah, an architecture that allows people to be on the street talking to us, having lunches.
Yeah. So kind of like the sidewalk cafe and sort of like a living street, like a living room outside, like an outdoor living room, right? Okay. So no one has said safety, though. No one said you want to feel safe, but that's part of a sociable city. It's definitely part of the nighttime economy. And I would say, so everything that you talked about, sidewalk cafes, having things to do, having diversity, how do we make sure that everybody has access to places to socialize, that's all a part of what I do. So the first thing I'll point out to you is in the coordinator role this year, is that my role is to balance, to work on a balance of both economic development of the nighttime economy and also the safety and quality of life impacts, to make sure that we're not creating impacts. So our cities were not necessarily designed for nighttime economy. If you think about, say this is a business and it's a shoe store, and you think about how many employees it might have, how many customers might fit in there, and what kind of trash it generates, maybe some boxes. Then think of a restaurant or a bar, and you think that same footprint can pack in a lot more customers, it employs a lot more people, it generates, it's like a little factory. You have people taking food in and taking food out. So you have to have more bathroom space, you have to have more trash collection. So all of these things, then you add up all of those next door to each other, and you have a district of bars and restaurants. Just think of that impact and to the infrastructure. Then you have a historic city, a 200-year-old city, who was not really designed for that. So we have to kind of go back and retrofit and look at, like, okay, this is where we're at and this is where we're going. What do we need to do? So one of the first things that I do as a consultant when I come into a city is looking at your slides, the one with the little guy, the second one, it says adapt to a city that operates at night. If you look at all the things that are listed there, one of the first things that I want to do when I go and work with a city, and I have to do here in Pittsburgh, is to look at what codes and ordinances do we have that address sidewalk cafes or managing sound, because now you have people that want to have entertainment or have speakers outside so that people on the patio can hear it, but then that impacts the neighbors. They want to have those windows that are like floor to ceiling, that are like a big wall opening up. So these are the things that we need to look at and say, is this a fit for Pittsburgh? Is that a fit for this neighborhood? And that's a lot of changes to be made. So that's a lot of the work I do, is kind of reviewing that, hearing from the community, hearing from businesses. I hear part of my job is to look at improving processes. So is the process that we have for opening a business, is it streamlined? Is it not too onerous? Where can we? Part of my job is to look at the gaps and the problems that are there, and what are the gaps, and how can we create a solution to fill that gap.
So that would be sort of like the manageability of having that business there in that district.
Right. Yeah, and so because I'm responsible for the entire city, and I'm the only staff person. Yeah, so that's. Yes, I do. I'm there a lot. I was there this morning. Yeah, I dealt with today 4 different neighborhoods alone just today, and dealt with interacting with council on some potential legislation. One of the things that we're piloting and trying out, you heard about how we don't have a commuter tax. So if we have a lot of people that are coming to these areas from outside the city, but they're not paying into the money or into the general fund for the Department of Public Works to clean up the mess, or the police to police the area, how can we generate a little bit of money to do that, to cover that? So we're doing a pilot program on the south side that is extending the parking meter collection from 6 o'clock to midnight on Friday and Saturday night. Have I said this? I'm forgetting what group I talked to. Okay, so we're 6 months in. It's a 1-year pilot, and in just 12 hours a week of that parking at $1.50 an hour, we have collected $100,000, and it goes into a trust fund that will be only put back into that area in which it was collected to pay for things like cleanup, extra trash collection, and police. But we get that coverage as citizens, and through our taxes. But the people that come from outside of Pittsburgh are kind of riding on our coattails, and so we want to be able to give them a quality experience, and we want to have our neighborhoods clean too. So that's what we're hoping to generate from that. So my job, a lot of what's taking my time now is implementing that. I am coordinating parking authority. This Night Rider is a sponsored shuttle, a park and ride. The mayor wanted to make sure that we had some free parking for people. So it's a parking lot that's further away, but it's a free parking and a free ride on Friday and Saturday night for employees or customers. And so they can use this to still access the district and be able to go there. So I coordinate this, the parking authority, the Department of Public Works, the police, and Uber and Lyft, and some of the things that happen at night around there. We have a safety lane because Carson Street's very narrow, so we decided we wanted to create a safety lane after 10 o'clock where no parking, and that police and fire and EMS can get through. So that's part of what I do. I'm relieved to say that there's a potential for me to have another staff person pretty soon next year. Yeah, so that I can accomplish more. But my main thing is I want to make sure that we have social opportunities for everybody in Pittsburgh. If that's the one thing that I do before I leave, I want to make sure that people aren't isolated and have the opportunity to socialize. So anyway, I'm really glad you guys are doing this. It's a really, this is the third time I've done this, and I think it's really exciting, and it's so important for us to have people like you that want to contribute and learn and care, so thanks.
Thank you. My name is Laura Dragowski. I work in Mayor Peduto's office, and my title is Critical Communities Initiatives Manager. I would give you 3 guesses, but you'd need like 100. Secret disclosure, I made that title up. I am working on a range of programs that are very important to the mayor and to the city, but maybe initially don't have a natural fit together. So those programs are related to substance use. So when we say substance use, that includes alcohol, illicit drugs, prescription drugs. I work on programs related to homelessness. We don't refer to people as homeless because homelessness does not define a person. It is a person who's experiencing homelessness. So we work with individuals at risk for or experiencing homelessness. We work with the providers and the outreach workers who engage those folks. We work with our public safety folks in order to be sensitive to the needs of individuals and experiencing homelessness and communities affected by individuals experiencing homelessness. There's always a cascade, right? There's always a ripple. I work on programs related to veterans. I think that to lump all veterans into one category is like lumping any group into one category. It's not fair, right? There are different needs among different people. So we have veterans who represent more vulnerable needs, and we have veterans who are underemployed because their resume doesn't necessarily match the qualifications for a job, but that doesn't mean that that veteran is not fully qualified for that job. It just means that we need to do better as employers to understand how to match that veteran's qualifications, which may be running a unit and not, typing 150 words a minute, but we need to figure out how to better match those qualifications. So there's hiring opportunities, there's sustaining the hiring and continuing to promote veterans. Access to health care, and that's something that it's a challenging place for the city to play because I can't remember if I said this. The county does the administration of a lot of the really important programs on human services side, and they do a phenomenal job. Homelessness programs. The county administers about $18 million in funds to homelessness, but our public safety folks still engage with people who are experiencing homelessness, right? So what is our role as a municipality? How do we ensure that we are collaborating with the community, the county, understanding what they need us to do, and then implementing the programs that are best suited to us versus trying to create something that's redundant to the many agencies that exist. I've also just started to work with communities, disability communities. I think, again, this is one of these challenges where we're lumping an entire group of people with various vast challenges and things that they bring to us into one category. And I always think that these categories are really problematic, right? I mean, I think that having categories is sometimes useful in delivery of service and in identifying where and who, but very much more often it's...
When you go the actual outreach to the person, you'll find out that there's various scenarios that
they're so different, right? I think you're right. And I think one of the things that we've been trying to understand is stigma, the harm that stigma does in many communities. So, for example, substance use. Our first responders are very oftentimes the people that have the opportunity to engage with and intervene in a person's life who might be using drugs. I always, this is such a short period of time that I hate assuming that I know more than the individuals with whom I'm speaking. So please.
I would, as far as the substance abuse policy, I would take, and I spoke with a reporter prior to this, Rich Lord, and actually I told him that in the case of substance abuse, I believe more, in order to affect and actuate what's going on with the addicts, we need more of an outreach type of actions happening with addicts rather than posting signs around, or it's more of a cold-hearted reach to try to get to that person that's walking the street and they might be lost. I mean, like I might be walking by this lady and I'm addicted, but she'll keep walking right by me and maybe no. And I mean, like, I'll go stop and grab some drugs, and then next thing you know, I'm dead there, right there on the ground, and the next guy will walk right by me or call 911 while he keeps walking.
Right, and I think you're pointing out two really important things. So the first thing is stigma, right?
I could have prevented it if I knew that.
There you go, and that's simple outreach of the citizen. You know what I mean? Like, too many times we take and we turn our backs on people that might be struggling. I mean, we need to bring back that social fabric as far as putting money into people feeling for each other again.
I 100%. I don't think that could have been articulated better. I think we got that recorded. Thank you. So I think you bring up really, so stigma and prevention, I think, were the two things I heard here. So the first thing is, we as community members need to stop thinking of a person who uses drugs as the other. And we needed to stop that 20 years ago, not just now. But now I think a lot of people are noticing because let's be honest, it's affecting different communities.
In my personal opinion, that there are more addicts than there are actually sober people.
I think
between recovering addicts and addicts, there is more of a society there than actually people that do not indulge.
And I think we can talk a lot about the fact that, in 1 minute, I think we can talk a lot too about what an addiction is, right? Technology addiction. I mean, I don't know. I know that I sit in meetings and I watch someone go.
Yep, social media.
You know, and I think that these are human behaviors, right? I think food, I think alcohol, I think there's a myriad of things that we do in an almost compulsive basis. And I think there's a really important distinction, right? We always talk about the difference between dependence and addiction. And it is so important in reducing stigma. Dependence is a physical, it's a biological reaction to use of a substance. All of us, if we took Vicodin for a period of time, would develop a physical dependence. It's just the reality of the medication. It has nothing to do with some inward judgment of ourselves or one another. Addiction is engaging in behaviors that are unhealthy or are risky to procure that substance. But there's a reason why some people become dependent and not addicted, and some people become addicted. And there are actually many reasons. It's a complex set of factors, but I look at it as it could be any one of us, right? So when do we as a community start to recognize that we're all in this together, that we all need to help one another, and that walking past a person and treating them like a nuisance is in many ways not a very effective thing to do because you're just further marginalizing.
That's a callous, because they say most addicts look for a reason to be down on themselves. What you've done is you've just actually boosted and intensified their feeling by 1,000.
So I think when people always ask me the one thing that is very hard is people always ask, what can I do as a community member to change the path of a person who's experiencing substance use related issues? So the first thing is that's private. That's something that this person's doing, and I think there can be this zealousness to go out and say, hey, tell me about your drug use. I don't want to. Who are you? I don't want to talk to you about my drug use. But what we can do is treat each other like people.
That's right. Say
hi. How's your day? How's it going?
But most people sometimes need to know what is or what people are having problems with. Sometimes other people cannot look at someone and just tell if they're having a substance abuse or if they're having other problems, which they don't know. Maybe I could walk past someone that is, I don't know, if he's just laying there. Or
no,
not.
And it's a perfect point. And I think the reality is, say hi.
Yes.
You don't have to say, oh, are you having a substance abuse related issue today? Hey, how's your day?
We need to be educated. That's what I'm saying.
I think you're right. I think you're right, and we need to be
educated.
compassionate. I think we need to care about each other.
So I like to say, what about the ones that ain't walking by? What are the ones, I have a friend that's Italian/German. He's 72 years old, and he suffered from depression, so that's why he drink. So he's not able to do any walking. What about the ones that's inside and close themselves inside and shut themselves down? How do we get to them?
And that's where I think there's an opportunity for peer outreach.
Hi, everybody. I am Erin Bruni. I'm from the Office of Municipal Investigations. Basically, OMI is the Internal Affairs Division for the City of Pittsburgh, which everyone, when they hear that term, is going to think automatically probably going to the police, which is the majority of what we do, but we do have other functions there. We conduct residency investigations for the city. We do all of the public safety background investigations, so EMS, fire, and police. And then we handle complaints of misconduct against any city employee, not just the police. So we are slightly different. If you've heard of the Citizen Police Review Board, we're a little bit different. They handle police issues only. We will handle anything in the city minus elected officials, so not the controller, not council, and not the mayor himself. Those are usually referred to like the ethics commission or something. We might get 200 to 250 complaints a year. They range in severity from what we call contempt of cop, so demeanor cases, attitude cases, unprofessionalism, up through neglect of duty. We might have illegal search and seizures, and probably the most severe would be use of force, civil rights allegations, things of that nature, false arrests. I am happy to report that when I started back in the year 2000, the city was under a federal consent decree. There were systematic problems within the police department. We were highly monitored by the federal government. They had stepped in. We were out from underneath the consent decree. The level of our complaint numbers are still fairly high, but the severity of those have gone way down. We do get our occasional use of forces, our illegal searches and seizures, but a lot of it is the attitude and demeanor. You have an encounter with a police officer and you did not like the way he spoke to you. He was disrespectful, he was unprofessional. That is kind of our bread and butter as to what we do. So you can file a complaint in a variety of different ways. People have been known to call the mayor's office. They forward it to us. They might email 311. It gets forwarded to us. You can call in and file the complaint day or night. We have a 24-hour answering machine. You can file anonymously. You can file third party. So a lot of times parents might file on behalf of their children, or you can, be the first party complainant. We just need enough information to get that complaint off the ground. So date and time, location, a description of the officer at the very least. If you don't leave your name and number and we are very limited and there's a piece of information we need, we might not be able to move forward. But we do our best to, track down every complaint that we can. We handle everything seriously. A lot of times it might be a matter of, taking a few minutes just to look at a police report and find out what happened and maybe explain that to the person. A lot of times people will say, they had a fight with their neighbor, police respond, and then the police didn't do anything. I wanted them arrested. Well, they probably wanted you arrested too, so I'm sure the officer referred you to the magistrate. Oh yeah, that's what he did. That's what he's gonna do. If there's no reason for them to make an arrest, they're gonna tell you, handle the matter civilly. So we might just be able to explain that to someone, not launch a full-scale investigation. Someone might just need an answer to what their gripe is. They need to vent for a little bit and say, yeah, we looked into it and it was handled this way because of this. This is the police policy and this is why it was handled that way. There's other times where there's a suggestion of misconduct and we launch into a full investigation. We're knocking on doors close to the incident. We are tracking down witnesses. We are following court proceedings. We're talking to everyone that we possibly can to do a thorough investigation. You had a question.
Is there a statute of limitations that you guys have for amongst a person filing their complaint?
Not necessarily a statute of limitations. However, there is a contractual rule with the Pittsburgh police that if an action could not go criminal, so could not has a little bit of a vagueness to it. So criminal acts might be the use of force, because that would be assault. Official oppression would be things like false arrest. So if those don't have a statute of limitations to them. Things like verbal exchanges, because those could not go criminal, those are 90 days. You have to file them within 90 days, or we could just say it's a contractual obligation that we're going to unfound it. We could do a little bit of legwork, but it's unfounded. Okay. The consent decree, the parameters were we had 120 days in order to complete our investigations. Some of the minor complaints don't take that long. Others are going to take that long, and there might be times that we have to say, listen, it took our complainant 90 days to get us medical records. We need a little bit more time. There might be reasons why we're extending past that deadline. We do try to complete them as thoroughly and as quickly as possible, just because if discipline is going to be administrated, that's going to come from the chief of police, but he also then has those same bureau rules where he needs to get that process started in a certain amount of time. So
I liked how the office is really taken step on forward on what happened a while back of last year in December, of how the kids in downtown were getting arrested without
with Port Authority?
Yeah. Those were my brothers, and I like how Deborah Walker actually
Oh, good.
did it,
Okay. So you had a
thoroughly
positive
and had-
experience with
yeah.
us. Okay, good.
I really appreciate what she did, because we were really having concerns because of those officers were not actually trained properly, because that's not how you use accessible force with teenagers that are just 15 or 14 years old. So I like the way she did her work, and I really appreciate her.
Well, good. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And we get a lot of other types of complaints. Like the one example I've given is, and we don't just investigate police. So that, we do get other complaints. Sometimes it might be public works, that they're in a truck at a park and they're at lunch and they start talking about what they were doing, and their language might get a little bit bad. And there's a child in a playground. We might get those complaints too.
So it's all departments.
It's all departments. So a lot of times we might just call the supervisor of that. But hey, who was working in the park that day? Maybe call them in and say, be aware when you're parked that close to the playground that children might be playing.
And that was my next question to you, because you said you just don't only deal with the police. You kind of go, kind of partner with, or we could call both if it has to do with the police.
Yep.
So what about social workers and therapists? Things of those nature. You said city employees.
They have to be a city employee, so a lot of times we also don't handle parking authority complaints. If you have a problem with a meter reader, we're not going to be the ones. If you call us and we don't handle it, though, we're going to do our best to try to find you the agency that you could file that complaint with. I would think that the Department of Human Services probably has an investigative body similar to that, or at least the state, the state Inspector General's office. There's probably someone that we can put you in contact with, because a lot of times people will call, and Pittsburgh has so many small municipalities. Maybe something happened in Mount Oliver, and that's who you were really dealing with. But you're going to call Pittsburgh because that's probably the most recognizable. So we might have to, maybe we do a little bit of research, and we're like, oh yeah, Pittsburgh got there to assist, but the initial officers are Mount Oliver. You need to call, whoever, and we refer the complaint out that way.
What kind of solutions do you have to these problems? So, for example, you talked about contempt, right, of a police officer. What would you do?
So our office does not do anything as far as disciplinary procedures happens. We put a disposition on the single allegation. So we evaluate all the facts. We do analysis based on the policy that that's being alleged, or the violation of that policy, and then we might say that it's unfounded. Maybe we had a witness that said, no, that is not how it happened. Or we had dash cam footage that said, no, that is not what happened. We were able to unfound something. A lot of times in verbal abuses, we're going to consider everyone on the same playing field. You had an encounter with a police officer, and you as the police officer, maybe you both have equally credible histories. If there's not a witness to that, we're going to say, we're going to not resolve it because we don't know what happened. We can't, we're not going to accept either word over the other. So out of fairness to both of you. Now, if an officer has a history or a citizen has a history, that might play into our analysis. If something is sustained, we've got witnesses, it's a policy violation, that is reviewed by the entire chain of command, and at that point they make a decision on discipline. Now, it might depend on what the severity of that infraction is. Use of force might be a higher level of discipline than an officer was having a bad day and they made a snide comment to somebody. They're not going to fire it over that. It might just be a verbal counseling. But then it is on record with us if that person.
Is it possible that nothing happens?
It is possible, yes. But it might be a minor infraction, and it's something but then we have a database for each employee, and as that behavior then might continue, then we can use that. So now when we have two people in a room, we're not sure what happened, but maybe this officer over here has 3 not resolves. We're like, maybe this is starting to happen, and this is a problem we need to address. So.
Two questions, quick ones. How close is your office with this one? Because this sounds so like the same thing, or this is more of the litigation?
Well, we are on the same floor, but they deal more with like discrimination in employment and housing. Ours is, misconduct. Okay. So, but we are, every once in a while we do get something where we might share cases.
Okay, do you visit community groups also?
Absolutely. My information is on the back and my name is on the paperwork. So, but I have to go, so thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, you get double the fun. So my name is Alex Peshkanix. It's Jeff, my colleague. We are both assistant directors in the city's Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. So this is the newest department in the city. We were just established in the budget last year in 2017. So the reason that the department was established was really two main things. The first was that there were a lot of pretty complicated transportation projects that we were working on, and there would sometimes be some difficult coordination across different departments in the city. We'd never had a transportation department or hadn't had one for many years, and so different parts of the job were kind of distributed all around the city, and sometimes it was hard to coordinate across those departments. So we really wanted to centralize that work and bring all those folks together. And then I think the second reason this department was established was because there's a lot of changes in transportation over the last couple of years, right? There's been a focus on kind of moving people rather than just moving vehicles. So that means, more support for mass transit and walking and cycling and making things better for accessibility. And then there's also sort of this whole nother world of smart cities or Internet of Things where, transportation tech is changing. Things like driverless cars, obviously, but even, how we take advantage of data and make decisions off of data. So these, all of these trends kind of made it pretty important for the city, and we're not the only city in the country that is thinking about this, but it made it important for us to kind of create this new Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. We worked with a national organization called the National Association of City Transportation Officials to really kind of map out what an ideal department would look like. Like I said, it was formed in the budget last year. We hired our first director in February. She came to us from Washington, D.C. She was with the District Department of Transportation, which was is Washington, D.C.'s PennDOT, essentially. We established, we've gradually been growing, sort of bringing some folks from the planning department, bringing some folks from public works. We're now up to about 35 staff members. So my job in the department, I'm the assistant director for planning and policy. So I spend a lot of my time kind of thinking, looking forward and thinking about what we need to do to kind of prepare. I work on sort of our network side, thinking about where we make our investments. We don't have enough money to do all the projects that we need to do, so how do we prioritize and focus on the ones that are most important? I'm doing a lot of work with the STEPS project. I don't know if you guys have heard about the assessment that we're working with the community on, kind of combining what the community and residents are saying are sort of the most important steps with data to figure out, where there's the most impact if the steps go away, where the steps are close to transit or schools, etc. And then on the policy side, I do a lot of our smart city work, preparing for the oncoming driverless cars, right? What does that mean for parking in the city? What does that mean for traffic signals? Things like that. How do we focus on kind of using data to make better decisions? And how do we collect that data and analyze that data in a way that actually makes it useful and not just a bunch of numbers in a spreadsheet? So Jeff can talk a little bit about what he works on.
I'm Jeff Skellican. I'm the other assistant director. I do project delivery. I work on your major your transportation improvement program projects. Those are your big federally and state funded projects. What I do is I work on all work on your roads and bridges throughout the city of Pittsburgh. Some of the projects that we work on, as you're familiar with, the Greenfield Bridge, Penn Avenue roadway, Forbes Avenue in downtown Pittsburgh, and we also work on upcoming projects like the Charles Anderson Bridge going into the park. One of the major parts of my job is to figure out how to get funding for these projects. We actually have to go out and figure out how much we need to design and construct a project for. My projects are a lot different than Alex, and we have to it's a longer process for the design process. We have a West Ohio Street Bridge project, and it took about 8 years to design this project. We hit a couple snags for it being deemed historic. When a bridge is deemed historic, we have to take the proper federally guidelines to design, to construct the project. We also have to deal and work with the community in what they're interested in the bridge looking like. So we were dealing with about 5 or 6 different community members, and they all wanted the bridge to look different ways and service the community in different ways. Any questions?
Is that bridge project the one that goes across Brighton where they're going to raise it for the train? Is that the one you're talking about? Okay. And then the Ring Road project,
So that Allegheny Circle, so that started kind of before the department even. That's how long we've been talking about it. But gradually, as some of the team members that had been doing that work, particularly the engineers that had been kind of involved in the design, that kind of became a DOMI project.
So I have a question. What would, in utopia, for you all, where would you like Pittsburgh to get to? Because to me, as a newcomer to Pittsburgh, it's a little bit hodgepodge, and I live on the north side, so I get a lot of the game traffic through what some people say are residential, what the businesses say is not residential. So what are you what's your end game?
Sure. So I think for me, or at least the way I see it, it's really about number one, taking advantage of the existing network, right? We're not in a situation where we're going to be building new freeways and new highways. We don't have the money, we don't have the space. We're already kind of built for twice as many people as we have, right? So kind of adopting that fix-it-first mentality of how do we take advantage of what we already have. And then I think the second thing is how do we kind of incentivize or encourage transportation and trips that are more efficient and kind of manage the system better. In a lot of ways, that means more mass transit. It means more walking and more cycling, because those are all kind of lower impact. They mean that we have to repave the road less. They mean that we have to kind of build less capacity, less sort of complicated intersections. And not all of that, obviously we don't run the buses, but what we can do is sort of make it a more desirable experience. We can, focus on making sure that the sidewalk isn't cracked between, where you go to pick up the bus and where you get off. We can focus on, how we connect to steps, for example, to get you to those destinations. So it's really about encouraging, we talk about mode shift, right? Getting from people that would otherwise be driving in a car by themselves, taking up a parking space on the street. How do we encourage, that same trip to that same destination, but using a different mode of transportation?
Sounds healthy to me.
It's with the Fitbit trend and everything else, people want to be out there walking more. We'd like to make it easier for them.
What are some things you're doing now to encourage mode shift? Like, what are your current projects besides the city steps?
So I think a good example for mode shift that I've been thinking about lately is sidewalks, right? How do we invest in sidewalks that actually are desirable, right? And how do we collect enough information about the existing condition of those sidewalks to be able to, get inspectors out there and to enforce when people don't maintain their sidewalks? How do we encourage and maybe provide incentives or programs to help homeowners fix their sidewalks that otherwise wouldn't? I think the other piece that we've been thinking a lot about is the way that we use our transportation projects. So we've been involved in working with the Port Authority and the county on bus rapid transit. That at the end of the day, those are buses that are running on city streets, right? They are going to be running kind of in the roadway, and how we kind of dedicate our lane space to cyclists, how we dedicate it to buses and not just to cars, I think is really important to get to that mode shift, because it makes those trips easier or more desirable when compared to just driving by yourself.
My question on that note, what you were saying is basically as far as the sidewalks. Now we all know that there's infrastructure problems, and basically a lot of the streets are going to have to be, as I've seen in certain neighborhoods where the gas company done dug up most sidewalks and replaced them. Do you think that it's fiscally responsible to right now at this moment to push like a campaign towards people repairing that, knowing that this infrastructure has to come up?
So I think one of the best ways to kind of be a smart city is to not tear up the road immediately after you repave it, right? So we've got a lot of utilities that do work in the right of way, right? It's not just the city, it's PWSA, it's the gas company, it's the cable company. So how we can coordinate and make sure that we make those investments strategically. They know what they're going to be doing 3 years out in many cases, right? So how do we save money by kind of working together? Everybody get in there at the same time, make the improvements that you need to make. You have to repave it once and then you're done for, X number of years. That coordination is really important, and it's going to save the city a lot of money if we can get it right.
Yeah, thank you.